So exciting. Good morning, everyone. Calling our very first Housing Development Finance Committee meeting, Executive Committee meeting to order. Thank you all so much for coming together this fine Tuesday morning. My name is Tamika Moss, and I serve as Secretary of the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency. And Courtney, if you could please call the roll.
Certainly. Chair Moss,
Present.
Director Surdich,
Here.
and Director Velasquez.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Well, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for this inaugural meeting. It really is a round of applause. All I can do is just smile and just take a moment to acknowledge all that it's taken to get us to this moment. I want to first start by thanking all of our teams who have gotten us here. Executive Director Surdich, Director Velasquez, Deputy Secretary Christina Munn, and everybody who has been so supportive of the governor's reorganization and the development of our Housing Development Finance Committee. It is we don't often take enough time, in my opinion, to celebrate these incredible milestones. The work is hard, the work is long, and it's incredibly rewarding. But this, to me, is delivering on a request from our stakeholders, our legislators for decades of working to consolidate our housing finance efforts across the state of California. Many of you, my colleagues here, have been doing this work in the state for a really long time, and this is just building on that incredible work. So really excited for today's conversation. Wanting to just review, the executive committee is designed to be a peer leadership team. So my colleagues here and I bring together the agency and departmental leadership to collaborate on the complexity of our policy issues, operational decisions that will shape HDFC's work, and really talk about the longer impact of our housing finance work over the many years to come. This includes overseeing how this new department will administer state housing finance programs, provide strategic guidance to staff on our policy priorities, program innovations, housing typologies, and other program guidelines. I want to just clarify, and I think this is an important piece for the public and for our colleagues, that HDFC will really function as an independent department within the new California Housing and Finance Agency. So it is going to maintain its own authority, its own identity, and have its own executive director, in fact. Speaking of which, Jonathan Klein, who is here with us in the audience, has been appointed as our first executive director of the Housing Development Finance Committee. We can give him some snaps if we're able to do that. Really excited to bring Jonathan on board. He brings more than 3 decades of leadership experience across community development finance, including senior roles at First Republic Bank, Union Bank, and earlier served in the federal government and nonprofit investment. So really excited, Jonathan, to have you join us and lead this incredible effort. Jonathan is expected to begin his work with us in mid-June, ensuring that HDFC has leadership in place ahead of our July 1st launch. So very excited about that. Just wanted to take a quick second to highlight today's agenda. We're really going to be focusing on our foundational items that this committee is needing to establish in order to begin our work here at HDFC. We'll consider and take action on the proposed executive committee charter. We will be reviewing the first read of our proposed 2026 meeting calendar, as well as discussing initial recommendations on the timeline for a consolidated application and aligned compliance monitoring. And I know that sounds not so fun, but it is also really exciting work that really prepares this committee to do its work throughout the remainder of the year. We'll also begin identifying policy areas for future agendas that we will build out over the course of the year to make sure that the committee is considering our stakeholders and state policy priorities. So really excited to talk about that. Public comment will be heard after each agenda item and then again at the end of the meeting. So with that, let's start our agenda. All right, we have an action item for item 3 on our agenda. It's our discussion, recommendation, and possible action to approve and adopt our proposed HDFC committee charter. I'd like to invite Christina Moon to the podium. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair and members. Item 3 is a discussion, recommendation, and possible action to approve and adopt the proposed HDFC charter. The charter is intended to establish the governance and operating framework for HDFC as the state's central coordinating body for multifamily affordable housing finance. The document outlines HDFC's purpose, vision, mission, guiding principles, organizational structure, core responsibilities, executive committee roles, staffing framework, and meeting and decision-making procedures. The charter is designed to support HDFC's broader goals of streamlining access to housing resources, improving coordination across programs and agencies, increasing transparency and predictability, and strengthening accountability. It also clarifies how the committee will provide oversight and direction as HDFC begins implementing its work. I want to take a moment to share the vision and mission statements from the charter that have incorporated staff and stakeholder input and will guide HDFC's work ahead. The vision is homes that Californians can afford, communities where they can thrive. And the mission is to alleviate California's affordable housing crisis. HDFC creates affordable homes by making California's housing finance system simpler, faster, and more transparent. We request the committee to consider approval and adoption of the charter through resolution number 2601. The supporting materials for this item include the proposed resolution and the draft charter itself, and I'm available to walk through key provisions and respond to any questions from the committee.
Thank you. I'd love to open it up to the committee for comments or questions.
I just want to, following up on Secretary Moss's comments earlier about the establishment of this, I want to thank staff for their hard work in putting all this together. Very exciting that we're moving this forward, and I think it's very clear that what is presented in the charter is very thought out and very, really meets the needs of what we're trying to do moving forward. So I'm very supportive of this.
Thank you.
I agree, Director Serge. First of all, same, following the comments of Madam Chair, I want to say I'm ecstatic about being here. The first meeting, thank you to the staff from agency and College FA and HCD for all the work getting us here. I know there are many, many people involved in this endeavor, and I just, going back in memory lane, I have to say, when I arrived to this job back in 2020, one of the first things I heard was about this proposal in the legislature by then Assemblymember Grayson, now Senator Grayson, to consolidate more the financing system. And, fast forward, I know it's been, decades in the making, people advocating for a more streamlined, unified system, and we are here in the very first public meeting. It's just terrific that we're doing this, and thank you for the Secretary's leadership getting us here. And about the charter, I think it just hits the high notes. I think a charter should just lay out the principles, should be high level. There should be no kind of very witty information in it, just the principles that lay out the work of this body. So I'm very supportive of this charter, and I don't know if we have to go to public comment. If not, I'm happy to make a motion to approve this.
Thank you. We do. Want to open it up for public comment. I do want to say before we do that, though, that just a reminder to the public, the governor's reorganization was passed through the legislature in July of 2025. So for the last year plus, we have been working really hard to get to this moment, really making sure that we have been thoughtful about our engagement around developing the mission and vision of this new department and this work, and making sure that it is reflective of the feedback that we have received from many of you. So just wanting to say this is not, as Director Velasquez was describing, this has been many years in the making. We have been hard at work toward the implementation of this work for some time. So really excited about what the charter is doing to codify that work. I would now like to open it up for public comment. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes to speak, and total public comment time for this item is limited to 30 minutes. To ensure both in-person and remote participants have an equal opportunity to speak, we will rotate between Zoom commenters and those in the room. Please avoid repeating comments that have already been made. If a previous speaker has expressed your point, you may simply state that you agree with the previous comments. Courtney, is there anyone who would like to make public comment?
If you would like to make a comment and you're here in person, please form a line at the microphone stand. If you are participating remotely and would like to make a comment, please raise your hand virtually and we will call on you by name. There's none at this time.
All right. Seeing none, is there a motion to approve resolution number 26-01?
I move to approve Resolution 2601, HDFC Committee Charter.
So moved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Courtney, if you could call the roll.
Certainly, Chair Moss,
Aye.
Director Surdich,
Yes.
and Director Velasquez.
Yes.
Resolution 2601 is approved.
Thank you. Motion passes. We're going to have a lot of applause this meeting. Each item. All right. Moving to item 4, our first read of our proposed 2026 meeting calendar. Inviting it back to you, Christina.
Item 4 is the first read of the proposed 2026 meeting calendar for the Executive Committee of HDFC. The purpose of bringing this item forward today is to provide the committee and the public with an early opportunity to review the proposed meeting schedule for the remainder of the year. While formal adoption of a meeting calendar is not legally required, staff views it as an important best practice that supports transparency, public participation, and effective planning for the committee's work. The cadence shown in 2026 is likely more frequent than in future years in that there's significant business for the committee to conduct in its first year of operation. As such, 2027 and beyond may have less frequent cadence of meetings. Today's item is presented for review only, and staff anticipates returning with the calendar for adoption at the June meeting, and we welcome any comments or direction from the committee on the proposed schedule.
Excellent. Thank you. Opening it up to the committee for comments or questions. All right. We're now going to open it up for public comment. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes to speak. Total time for this item is limited to 30 minutes. Again, just to reiterate, avoiding any repeat comments that have already been made. If the previous speaker says your point, just to simply state that you agree with the previous comments. Courtney, is there any public comment for this item?
If you would like to make a comment and you're here in person, please form a line at the microphone stand. And if you are participating remotely and would like to make a comment, please raise your hand virtually. There's none at this time.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing this item back on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving next to item 5, discussion of our draft recommendations on timeline for the consolidated application and aligned compliance. I think we have a number of speakers for this item: Christina Moon, Catherine McFadden, and Megan Kirkby.
Okay, we have a deck to cast, so I'm gonna try to do this. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Okay. So item 5 presents draft recommendations on the timeline for a consolidated application process and aligned compliance monitoring. This is a key first milestone for HDFC that was in the Governor's Reorganization Plan's legislation to ensure that HDFC made meaningful progress in its early days. Today's discussion is intended to give the committee an opportunity to review the proposed direction, provide feedback on the implementation timeline, and help shape the next steps for this important body of work for HDFC staff. To start with an overview, we're currently in the inception of a core innovation coming out of the agency reorg, which is this body, HDFC. So I don't need to explain the reorg to you, but we have CHHA starting officially on July 1st. And of course, right under that, you can see HDFC, which we are starting now. And this is in many ways, as Director Velasquez mentioned, a culmination of many years of work and advocacy built up over the years. We've been working towards a more consolidated approach to reduce friction across the housing finance system for many years, with the Supernova created out of AB 434, the creation of AB 519 work groups, and currently through the reorg and ongoing work coming out of the AB 2006 asset management. And through this arc, we've been building the organizational infrastructure to do this work through HDFC. The legislation for the reorg includes milestones for the exec committee to meet by July 1st of this year to ensure we've made progress even as we work to stand up HDFC. Those milestones are a timeline for implementing the consolidated application and a timeline for improved alignment of compliance monitoring for state projects. Before I hand it off to my colleagues to walk through the recommendations, I first want to acknowledge that in addition to the legislative and organizational work that got us here, we have also been listening deeply to our partners across the field. This includes the many AB 519 work groups, dialogues at conferences, meetings, reorg working groups, and more. We've also had our partners at the Turner Center support our team in facilitating more focused and technical conversations on specific topics and best practices. And much of this feedback that you see highlighted here will inform the priorities for HDFC as we implement this work. Now I'll hand it to Catherine McFadden to walk us through the first recommendation.
Good morning. Catherine McFadden, Director of Multifamily Programs for CalHFA. I am also very happy to be here. Okay, so I get to present the first recommendation, which is create a consolidated application. The consolidated application advances the state towards full coordinated multifamily funding through a unified, streamlined process. As Christina mentioned, it's rooted in extensive engagement with developers, lenders, local governments, and agency partners. It supports the governor's 26-27 budget proposal to modernize multifamily housing finance and reduce fragmentation. So one application, one award. Under AB 519, HCD, CalHFA, TCAC, and SIDLAC created or will create HDFC award guidelines covering state-administered competitive multifamily sources. These unified HDFC guidelines will have common threshold requirements, unified scoring rubric, and limited program thresholds where needed. A single application will be submitted through a single portal, reviewed through a coordinated process. Simultaneously or near simultaneous awards across subsidy, bonds, and tax credits. Projects will move straight from award to readiness milestones without waiting for sequential rounds, reducing stalled and post-award friction. So the consolidation includes a number of programs, and I will mention them just briefly. So it's the MHP program, the Joe Cerna Farm Worker Housing Grant Program, IIG, the Veterans Housing and Homeless Prevention, TOD Housing, the Housing for a Healthy California, the CalHFA Mixed Income Program, the subsidy component, AHC, the housing component, developer-facing other HCD multifamily programs like PLHA Competitive, Home, National Housing Trust Fund, CDBG DR. And of course, this is not possible without the coordinated alignment with TCAC and SIDLAC for bonds and tax credits. Is it this one? Okay, thanks. So, the governor's budget proposal. This is the enabling framework. So the budget proposal reallocates program responsibilities to enable a true one-stop shop for full financing. The proposal is 50% of the annual state private activity bond cap is set aside to HDFC projects receiving subsidy. For HDFC projects, SIDLAC and TCAC would ministerially award 4% tax credits and bonds up to the HDFC set-aside. The remaining 50% will stay with SIDLAC and TCAC for non-HDFC projects. Therefore, two coordinated pathways, or two doors, that both lead to complete capital stacks. So the recommendation includes outcomes. Outcomes are very important. The first one is coordinate and streamline multi-housing finance. This one application, unified scoring, coordinated interagency review, the integrated award decisions across subsidy, bonds, and credits. Projects are fully funded at award, reducing stall deals and post-award friction. Next is outcome number 2, increase speed, predictability, and transparency. What this means is shorter timelines from application to award, clearer, more accessible requirements, scoring and public documentation, and governance through public engagement via the executive committee oversight, which increases trust and consistency. Next outcome is improve customer service and system usability with early and ongoing feedback loops with sponsors to shape process improvements, better public tools, guides, dashboards, and clear documentation. We're focused on reducing total time from award to construction start, not just processing time. And last outcome is build a scalable, continuously improving system. So we're going to treat initial implementation as the foundation for ongoing modernization. We're going to apply lessons learned to other parts of the multifamily portfolio over time, and we're going to invest in staff, training, cross-training, and professional development to sustain all these improvements. So next up is the implementation timeline. So you will see 2026. So this is really planning and guideline development. So in July, we'll have the first draft guidelines, and we'll have a coordinated review framework will be released. In September, we'll have a second of the draft guidelines and public comment. And then in November, we'll have our pilot portal launched. And then in December, Executive Committee adopts final guidelines and the 2027 timeline. In 2027, a NOFA will be issued in January, and the portal will be open for applications. The applications will be due in round 1 in April, and potential round 2 NOFA will be in July, and the first round of awards will be in August, which is round 1 of 2027. And then we'll have another application due in October of 2027 with December awards under the 2028 bond set-aside and adoption of 2028 guidelines if needed. So in closing, the recommendation to create a single application really fixes longstanding fragmentation for the state's multifamily environment. It reduces time, cost, uncertainty for developers and public agencies. It ensures faster delivery of affordable housing across California, and it creates a system that is transparent, scalable, and adaptable to future needs. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Megan, who's going to talk about the aligned compliance.
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, committee. I'm Megan Kirkaby. I'm our Chief Deputy Director for HCD, and I have the pleasure of presenting recommendation 2, our recommendations and implementation timeline to align compliance monitoring. So first, to discuss our progress to date, as many of you are aware, since January 2025, we've been doing interagency compliance monitoring integration with HCD, CalHFA, and TCAC. These aligned processes, we're working across 5 different areas to try and get greater alignment. physical and site inspections, getting to a single lead agency inspection, removing duplication there, reserve draws, a unified process for that aspect of asset management, ownership control, party changes, working towards a single form, property management, company changes, also through a single form, and operating budgets, working towards a combined form. A lot of the fruit of that labor launched in February under the California Housing Management System, which was jointly launched by HCD, CalHFA, and TCAC, which improves transparency, efficiency, and coordination in our statewide affordable housing compliance monitoring. And looking forward to the future, our plans through 2026 are to continue this integrated approach, continue working toward our AB 2006 protocols, and also get ready for the transition. As you heard us talk about the single award, single application, that also that infrastructure also facilitates much more streamlined post-award processes and asset management. So that will make a big difference in the future, but we're also need to continue that coordination work to further consolidate our monitoring practices across agencies. And we want to ensure stability during this transition period, so we're preparing a plan for the transition of asset management and compliance monitoring for the HDFC portfolio of projects. Then we won't be stopping there. In 2027, we're looking to expand the application portal functionality past awards. So there'll be a portal where that single application flows through. The back end of that portal, to use a wonky term, will continue being built out to expand those functions to support compliance monitoring, construction monitoring, and potentially full life cycle project tracking, so that all of our customers can have one place in which they're accessing all the ways they need to talk to us, from application to award to post-award to long-term asset management. And then, we'll be working with our partners to develop shared data access and aligned portfolio monitoring tools. For 2028 and beyond, we're looking to centralize compliance monitoring for the HDFC portfolio. So we'll be doing our first HDFC-funded projects. Will begin entering that asset and compliance monitoring phase, and we'll be looking to continue to make system improvements that enable more efficient consolidation of monitoring and strengthens expertise across our housing agency portfolio. So hopefully what you heard from that is that there's been a lot of coordination to date, and that our plans are very much to continue facilitating additional streamlining, not just on the awards piece, but on the asset management and compliance piece alongside all of our partners. And that ends our presentation on these two recommendations to the committee. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Questions, comments from the committee?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for all the work that is leading us to where we are. Let me also premise my questions by saying of course, we have a lot of this information. We get briefed by our staff. We prepare for public hearings. We are in front of committees in the Assembly and the Senate. So we have a lot of this information already, but it's very important to get clarification on certain things. And more importantly, as part of this committee, we are not talking to government staff anymore. We are talking to the public. So we formulate our questions based on, how would the public try to interpret these things. So two questions that I have. One relates to AB 519. The other relates to AB 2006. These pieces of legislation, one is AB 519 for the public single application, and AB 2006, the way in which we more jointly monitor compliance of the housing that we financed. These pieces of legislation were enacted into law before the reorganization, before this committee was even it was contemplated, but was not certainly created. So on AB 519, you talk about, and I know Mr. Search Serge know this because he was leading the AB 519 team at HCD before being appointed executive director of HDFC. But AB 519 is just explain how that relates to HDFC guidelines that will be approved later in the year. So basically, AB 519, the single application, just falls into the guidelines of HDFC because AB 519 called for a number of recommendations that we would submit to the legislature to propose a more streamlined way of financing state dollars. And so is AB 519 basically becoming eventually the HDFC guidelines? Just a little understanding on that. And then I'll ask my second question of AB 2006.
Thank you so much, Director. So it's a very important question. I think I just want to emphasize, I think these questions do help explain something, we've been out trying to talk about, but I think one of the benefits of having this public hearing is that we get to have a venue to not only speak to the committee, but to speak to the public and make sure these things are landing. So really appreciate that. So one of the things that's been so beneficial is the AB 519, the Affordable Housing Finance Working Group that came out of Director Sturgis's work and many others, really came to one concrete recommendation, which was that there should be a path where you can receive state subsidy and an allotment of bonds effectively simultaneously. And there should be an alternative path for those that are not seeking state subsidy to go directly to the Tax Credit Allocation Committee and CDLAC, the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee, for those resources. That was the main recommendation coming out of the first aspect of AB 519, and it mirrors actually what we're creating here today and what shows up in the governor's budget proposal. The governor's budget proposal, in a way, is the infrastructure that allows that recommendation to take place. And so coming out of that working group, looking at how do we enable a single application that can produce state subsidy and an allotment of bonds at the same time, the pathway there, or the infrastructure needed to take that even further beyond the governor's budget proposal, is to create a set of guidelines that that effectuate and are accurate to the statute for all of those state subsidy programs going into it that my colleague Catherine went over. Each of those has statutory requirements behind it. And the CDLAC and TCAC programs have regulatory and statutory requirements beyond it. So the work of creating those guidelines is to create a set of joint guidelines that is accurate and represents the statutes of each of those pieces, but removes but rather than taking 7 programs plus 2 sets of regulations and stapling them all together, which might not actually make things much easier for anyone than applying 9 different times. Or maybe it would be a little easier, but it wouldn't take you all the way there. The work going on right now is really digging back to the statute to create a set of guidelines where, instead of everyone developing their own uniform thresholds, one set of uniform thresholds that are capture all those pieces that are not unique to the programs. And then putting out unified scoring that can work for all of those funding sources, but acknowledging that each of those funding sources does have unique traits, even back to the statute, that need to be recognized and are there for some purpose. And so making sure that those are captured as well. And so that's the work of the HDFC guidelines, which I see as combined with the governor's budget proposal around creating a set-aside bond allocation for HDFC to administer, and the modernization of the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Program, moving into separating out the housing portion. The guidelines, as well as that budget proposal, are the implementation of the Affordable Housing Work Group's recommendations that we've seen to date. But we very much imagine that Affordable Housing Finance Working Group, both the reviewing entities and the interagency work that's part of that, as well as the continued connection with stakeholder engagement, is critical as we move from the draft implementation stage to the full implementation stage. So
Thank you.
hopefully that adds some color.
No, that's great. Because going back to the passage of AB 519, it was just presenting recommendations to the legislature. But the legislature is, in fact, moving forward, approving a reform that the governor proposed that materializes any and all recommendations that come out of the working group on 519. So everything is like,
Happening together.
it may not have started like that, but it's now actually happening together. So thank you for that explanation. Now, on AB 2006, again, another, I think it passed after 519 or the same year? Before, it passed before. So again, the idea on 519, this committee's work is very much so the front end, how the state finances, approve awards and finances state subsidy. Then on the back end, 2006 is to ensure that we have a better system to monitor and track compliance on all of the housing that is financed by this committee. So right now, AB 2006 is already, in a way, like we are presenting to providers, sponsors of affordable housing, options to make that experience easier, which is if you are financed with the tax credit program or HCD or College FA, there are now better ways, easier ways for developers to present information on how they are complying with all of our regulatory agreements. Isn't it true that when we move to a system under HDFC that consolidates, unifies more affordable housing, the implementation of AB 2006 actually gets easier? Because right now, if I have LIHTC units, I have HCD units, I have College FA units, I am still submitting for all of these requirements. You still need to check which of these entities I am regulated under. But in the future, there will be most likely one submission. Of course, this happens over many years. It's probably not going to happen in year one, but over many years, it happens in a way that it gets even easier, where you are submitting requirements for what used to be all of this entities under. I mean, can you elaborate a little whether what I'm saying makes sense or no?
It does, and I think it's a through line from what Megan was saying, right? Where we're working on that front end guideline work to simplify how the sources come together, and that will dictate a little bit how, and simplify how we kind of, as reviewing entities, kind of make sure the longevity of the properties remain. And so I think it does provide more streamlining as we move through a more simplified system. I think the work ahead that was referenced in the recommendations is we need to do a lot of that planning of how we organize the state to really capture that efficiency as we move forward for these HDFC projects. So we're going to have this great kind of front end work, and we have this foundation of 2006 work that's happened. But, you know, is there a better way? Right now, we have momentum from AB 2006. They're in different teams still. And so we're still sharing information. Sometimes it's manual. There's a lot more opportunity through the portal and other technology to develop better tools, as well as how we organize our teams to review things more efficiently as well.
Yeah, please.
the timelines that were presented are appropriately ambitious, given the work that we're trying to do here. Are there any specific issues that you're worried about potentially getting in the way of moving this forward by the end of the year, throughout the year? I mean, is there anything that we should be keeping an eye out for as we're working with our teams to help implement this work?
Well, I want to hear from Catherine, too. I mean, I think it's a big change. So I think some of this is like an industry change management exercise for all of us as we think about how to consolidate everything and do it in a real one-stop. I think that can be kind of uncomfortable to think about, how does this affect my pipeline? So we are working through that with our partners. And there is going to be a lot of engagement, socializing, stress testing, some of the ideas that we're pulling together. So I agree, it's appropriately ambitious. I think we are really pushing to get something to present more externally and share out with folks so we can really get that feedback loop started. So that's the part where I think we're eager to get to meet that first July date.
And I just wanted to add the stakeholder piece is incredibly important. There are a lot of divergent interests, and Christina mentioned pipeline. There is some uncertainty about how HDFC, the first round, what's that going to look like? How's that going to affect my project? And we know that there are partially funded projects, so the idea in the first round is to take some of those pipeline projects that just need a little bit of funding to get them to the finish line. As we know, there are a lot of projects out there, and we know that the Supernova is out there right now to do exactly that, but there's still such a huge pipeline of deals that need funding. So I think ensuring that we get the stakeholder feedback that works for the first round, but also the second round, which is the round that we intend to move forward with cadence, the full kind of, this is the new HDFC model, so that we can then have allocations for 2028. And I know there were also some concerns about the set aside, the 50%, and we're really trying to be sensitive and listen to our stakeholders to ensure that not only do we get it right and listen and get it in the guidelines, but that it works. This is only, it's important that it works. This is something that we, as mentioned, we've been working on for years, decades. I've been in this industry a long time, and I know it's going to be a socialization change. I think everybody is ready for it, some more than others, but let's ensure that we really are aligned with our stakeholders to ensure that the guidelines and the scoring and how we're processing the applications really work to move projects quicker through the awarding and also closing timeline. So it's just ensuring that we again are at the table and can hit these deadlines, and they are ambitious, but it's much needed at this time.
Just following up on that piece, I'm curious about one of the ways that I think HCD has done an incredible job around many of our subsidy programs is through its technical assistance. And I'm curious, Christina, you talked about this as kind of change management, not just for our state partners and staff, but for the industry. Can you talk a little bit about the technical assistance that will be provided to our sponsors and stakeholders through this process as we sort of mirror the change work we're doing internally? How are you all thinking about engaging our stakeholders?
I'll speak to that, and then, happy to have my colleagues weigh in as well. I think, not to, harken back to the last comment so much, but I do think it's critical that the technical assistance in a way here is starting from the fact that we are putting out draft guidelines, that what has been pulled off over the last 8 years shouldn't have been possible, but it did happen. We put out an enormous amount of funding quickly. We were able to get it in the hands of people very quickly. But by doing that across so many different programs, the stakeholder community and ourselves don't have the time to, much of that had to be put out through NOFAs that were on the street quickly. without the benefit of this draft guidelines phase. And so by doing 2 rounds of draft guidelines, not only are we bringing in the additional partner of our stakeholders, so, our team isn't just us anymore. It can really be our stakeholder community helping us with some of those tough calls and informing and getting to a better product. But that also means that all of our customers are seeing that that pathway earlier and further in advance, which then helps not have more time, reaction time, to be thinking about what that future application will look like for them. And then I think in addition to that, we're seeing the ability to, by consolidating everything, also be able to use our staff more efficiently to be able to deploy more technical assistance. I think some of this is still in the works, but I think I see a lot of the work we're doing right now is co-education between our teams and really getting ready to be able to do that education externally as well. Because again, when you're it's going to be hard, and I don't want to underestimate that. But by focusing our energy this way, we also can deploy our resources differently than we have been, because there will be less duplicative work to do. We can have more staff that we deploy toward technical assistance and a longer ramp-up period leading into that application. And then, of course, the hope and the dream that this facilitates is to be able to follow the cadence much more like a TCAC CIDLAC, where you're rather than wholesale creating new programs, we're updating these guidelines as needed so that they can function across an entire year, and perhaps as we stabilize into even 2 years and increased predictability that way, I think also facilitates the technical assistance.
I also want to add, as we think about how to use our staff, we also have additional existing consulting support to really provide that direct technical assistance. So we will kind of map that out in the coming months. And as we develop a portal, we're really thinking about how to onboard folks so they understand how to navigate it and how to use it. And so there will be additional technical support there as well. So we are thinking about it, more to come.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, any additional comments or questions? All right, well, oh, please.
I'm just a little nervous about, I'm looking again at the, I'm just looking again at the slide, what one is it, 10? Where we have, it's almost June. I mean, it's almost June. We have the first draft of guidelines in July. And then basically 2 months later, we have the second draft.
Appropriately ambitious.
Just that. Just realize that, but.
Well, again, I appreciate that comment, and I think it's part of what's going to be important is that this is iterative, that we are coming back to understand what delays we may be incurring if they happen, what progress we're making. So the points earlier about that this is engagement almost seems insufficient. It really is a partnership and sort of co-designing what we're coming up with. But I also think, given the crisis that we are experiencing and the challenges that we've had in our housing finance system, that we should be appropriately ambitious in trying to get guidelines out to our sponsors and stakeholders so that they are on the journey toward a much more efficient and effective system. So I'm feeling, I got you. I also think we got this.
If I may,
Please.
and it's the work. It's not like we're starting today on this work, right? I mean, this work has been going on for months, if not years, in terms of thinking about and putting pen to paper on how to align some of these projects. We've all been part of that. I just want to make sure that that's publicly known as well, that we're not starting today and having something in 2 months.
And maybe before we open it up for public comment, would love to hear from each of our speakers. As you think about where we are in our process, almost June of 2026, what does success look like in our efforts to get these draft guidelines underway and allow, how can the public sort of know whether or not we're moving in the right direction from your perspective in the next several months?
Yeah, I mean, this is the core scope of work for HDFC and its new team. As Tony mentioned, or sorry, Executive Director Sertich mentioned, there are a lot of staff already kind of digging deep to work on these guidelines, and I think the real outcomes we are seeking are what you see on the timeline. We really want to drive towards final guidelines by the end of the year, such that 2027 HDFC is ready to issue funding under the new approach, hopefully with the budget proposal already established so that the structure is there and the funding will flow all through the one-stop. So that's really what we're all aiming for. I think there's a lot of other things, we'll talk in the next item about other ideas and things, but really that's the core work, and it's really how do we manifest that on a timely way.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, I'll now open up, we're now going to invite the public to speak. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes to speak on this item. Again, our total public comment time on this item will be limited to 30 minutes. Please, if there are any comments that you have heard already, just co-sign on the previous comments with a simple statement that you agree. Courtney, is there any public comment at this time?
If you would like to make a comment and you're here in person, please form a line at the mic stand. And if you are participating remotely, please raise your hand. Okay, we do have someone who'd like to make a comment. Joey Shields, please go ahead and unmute your microphone and begin your comment.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning, everyone. My name is Joey Shields, and I'm a senior project manager with Link Housing Corporation. We're a nonprofit affordable housing developer based in Long Beach, California. First off, I just want to applaud state leadership, BCSH, HCD, CalHFA, HDFC, and all of the staff who've been involved on the creation and implementation of HDFC. Here at Link Housing, we're beyond excited to witness the movement to a one-stop solution. We're really grateful for all of you and your hard work. While we look forward to applying to HDFC in the coming months, we are concerned to see that REAP 2.0 and the non-competitive PLHA formula funds were not included among the eligible HCD programs to pair with bonds allocated to HDFC. And as we saw with the previous SuperNOFA applications, demand for these competitive funding sources significantly outpaces the resources available. So even if promising housing bond in the November 2026 ballot, we respectfully request that the REAP 2.0 and non-competitive PLHA formula funds programs be included, as doing so will expand the opportunity for additional viable projects and advance greater regional equity in housing investments statewide. Really appreciate your time and your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. If there's anyone else participating remotely or in person, please come forward or raise your hand. There's none at this time.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you for your comment. Now we're going to move to item 6, discussion of our policy areas for our 2026 agendas. Christina?
Item 6 is a discussion of potential policy areas for future 2026 to 2027 Executive Committee agendas. As mentioned under the last item, staff have been engaging with partners across the housing finance system, including developers, lenders, local and tribal governments, investors, and other stakeholders. And through that outreach, a number of policy topics have emerged for further consideration, discussion, and possible committee direction. The purpose of this item is to ask the committee which of these issues it would like staff to bring back in future meetings for deeper research, stakeholder engagement, and recommendations. The list identified in the memo includes topics such as underwriting and closing process improvements, construction lending, portfolio and asset management strategies, federal updates, new and emerging housing innovations, and implications of broader statewide housing and homelessness planning efforts for HDFC's work. To be clear, the main focus and work ahead for HDFC in 2026 remains items not on this list, but those stated in the charter and recommendations heard earlier: updating the universal guidelines, preparing the unified application, and the creation of the unified application portal. Those are the core areas that HDFC must deliver along with the timeline that we discussed. Beyond these core areas, a critical path item to HDFC implementation will be underwriting and closing process improvements. So staff do recommend including that topic as critical to address in upcoming meetings. This is intended as a priority-setting discussion amongst the committee. Staff is seeking direction from the committee on which areas you believe are important for HDFC's work and would like to hear on upcoming agendas, and any specific questions you seek to answer for these topics. Work on topics that are not selected will still progress and may still come before the committee informationally. Moving forward, this guidance will inform the new executive director, HDFC staff, as well as HCD and CalHFA staff as they plan their scope, time, and resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members?
You want to start? I started before, so start.
We'll make sure we're very equitable in our starting.
Please, let's do it, at least.
No, I appreciate the ability to talk through this a little bit. I do think it's, first and foremost, the goal is to get to a single application process with consistent guidelines and all of that as soon as possible. But I think the other things that we really need to address are issues that are getting to the ultimate goal of creating more housing more quickly, more affordable housing more quickly. So along those lines, I think that the two things that are listed on here are the underwriting and closing processes. The more we can streamline those, unify those, and create consistent processes, the better off we'll be. A lot of this has already begun behind the scenes in terms of work that we've been doing with HCD as well as TCAC to make sure that we're working together. We're providing information back and forth that will streamline these processes. But then the other big thing we're working on as well is construction lending. No, it's a long a goal of the development community to get the HCD funds out as quickly as possible to help reduce costs, to help. And so one thing we're working on at CalHFA is creating a construction loan program so we can partner with HCD and help get that money out more quickly. So we're hoping to have that up by the time HDFC is fully up and running, working very closely with our Director of Multifamily, Catherine McFadden, on that. I won't directly point at her and challenge her, but it is something that we're very focused on doing. The other thing that I'm really excited about with this committee is the ability for us to more publicly discuss the collaboration that's happening behind closed doors and make sure that we are letting stakeholders know the work that's going on in discussions between HCD, CalHFA, our partners at CIDLAC and TCAC. We are, and we can continue to bring that to the public about the steps that we're taking to make that happen. AB 2006, AB 519 are just a couple examples of things that we're moving forward along with what I was just talking about. So I think those are the big pieces. The other thing is on the last piece about new and emerging housing innovations. I don't want to lose sight of the overall goal of creating housing more efficiently and more quickly by focusing on potential improvements out there that are yet to be proven or yet to be I guess what I'm saying, I want to incentivize the larger efficiencies rather than focusing on specifics that may get to those efficiencies. If we're creating an incentive for projects to be built more efficiently, I would hope that the marketplace would drive towards those possibilities rather than explicitly call out some things that are unproven that we're not sure about working or not.
Please.
Well, these are excellent 6 policy areas. Thank you to the staff for recommending these. Let me start with the last one, just because Mr. Sertich mentioned something about kind of a broader look at housing innovations. And of course, we are all mindful that this year is a year where the legislature is championing, primarily, the work of Assemblymember Weeks is championing this body of research and recommendations to reduce the cost of building, reduce the astronomical cost of building housing, especially affordable housing in the state. That work, I was just on Thursday at the Cal Matters Ideas Fest on a panel with her, and she really described very well like her efforts and the movement currently underway towards incentivizing factory-built modular housing. And I think it's important to, as part of that recommendation, to watch closely how the legislature is advancing these measures, but coupled with research. I know Turner Center, UCLA, they've been doing a lot of work around other ways in which the state can incentivize reductions in the cost of housing. So we need to do both. We need to do legislative measures this year coupled with research on other areas. And it's very important that this committee looks at that because, this is going to be, the guidelines are going to be the basis for criteria of future financing from the state. And so I think we're going to have to focus on criteria that incentivizes cost efficiencies and cost containment. And I would say it's also going to be very important to inviting people to talk about those at future meetings, both on the research and on the policy fronts. The first one, going back to my comment about HDFC guidelines that we're going to put forth, first draft, second draft coming up, basis again for criteria of future financing. I think number one is I would argue, one of the first presentations that are going to be very important for this committee and for the public to hear on the progress on both the statewide housing action plan and the action plan for preventing and ending homelessness. Why? Because these guidelines, these criteria, this committee needs to be driven by data, and the progress on those plans will give us a lot of data in addition to stakeholder feedback to know how we fine-tune that criteria. One of the things that I keep saying, because that's work coming out of annual progress reports from every single jurisdiction that HCD collects, is still that very low and extremely low housing for very low and extremely low income households continues to be the most underperformed area of housing production in the state. By looking at it, by having in a public forum, see that data, gives us the ability to focus this criteria on housing that serves people experiencing homelessness, that have especially chronic homelessness, and people in extreme poverty. So again, data is going to be very important for the work of HDFC guidelines, so these presentations are going to be very important. And I know, I'm looking at Ms. Kirkby, I know that June, right, is usually the month for APR submissions. So we may not have, we still, I think, are operating under 2024. I don't know if in future couple, 2-3 months, may have something for 2025. It just depends on how quickly the staff at HCD reviews and curates the data, but any efforts in that regard are going to be very important. And then number 3, I'm very excited because, construction lending, number 2, it's a heavy lift. It's been, many sponsors, developers have advocated for a construction lending program at HCD, especially, and we know it's very important, but it takes time. But number 3, underwriting and closing process improvements are things that can support a lot of the same objectives, which is let's ensure that we have money awarded faster, that we have regulatory agreements done faster, closing processes gone faster, and all of that is going to help developers build housing faster, which is what we want in lieu of a robust, strong construction lending program. So very excited about number 3, and of course, federal updates is something that we're all constantly getting briefed on, because we don't have, a friendly, very pro-housing administration right now, and we need to do all we can here in the States to counterbalance all that. So thank you for that.
Thank you, colleagues. Maybe just a couple of additional thoughts. Building on Director Velasquez's point around how we are underperforming in our production of extremely low and low-income housing in the state, and have been for decades. In fact, part of why we're in the crisis that we are. I will be curious to hear from staff how we are working with local jurisdictions around their housing element compliance and their RHNA goals. It's going to be really important that, the public, we talk often both in the statewide action plan as well as our 3-year plan to address homelessness around how many homes we need built over the next decade, how many of those, 1 million of those needing to be affordable. But I do think that the public is interested in how what we are doing at HDFC will facilitate the acceleration of local jurisdictions actually building those homes. So it'll be really important for the staff to be able to, not only sort of update this committee on its progress, but also what we all need to do as an ecosystem to facilitate better outcomes toward those goals. Another thought that is not here, but related, is HCD, and I don't know that the public really knows this, but HCD as a department has doubled in size since this administration took office, administering billions of dollars over the last 7.5 years toward our housing goals across the state. And only second to our Human Services Agency, our agency has the highest bill load, meaning the highest number of bills from the legislature related to housing and homelessness of any agency in the state. And so with that volume of bills and intention around addressing our housing and homelessness crisis, I want to make sure that we are utilizing the authorities, the intention of the sort of aggregate impact of what those bills, not just AB 2006, AB 519, but many of the efforts to streamline, to support local jurisdictions in developing and preserving housing. How are we doing? And what can this committee do to either provide education, support, authorities, whatever we have in our toolbox to make sure that we are getting the maximum impact from the legislature's attention and the administration's attention to addressing our housing and homelessness crisis. So I think it'll be helpful to facilitate some conversation around that as well. And then lastly, I often talk about housing as an all government responsibility, that it is not just the new Housing and Homelessness Agency's responsibility to address our housing and homelessness crisis, but in fact, every single Californian is impacted by this crisis in their lives, no matter if you are housing insecure or unhoused, or if you're trying to buy your first home. And so I would love for the staff to bring forward suggestions and recommendations about the work that the state is doing to have all of our state departments and agencies consider how housing is impacting their work. We have our housing as a part of our climate strategy. We have certainly all of our transit-oriented development that we do across the state, our health and human services colleagues who are providing social safety net support services for people experiencing housing insecurity and homelessness. I really want to make sure that we are bringing those policies and efforts into HDFC's work so that ultimately over time, we are truly an integrated and harmonized state government responding to this crisis in our full capacity.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other comments, questions, y'all? Before we open it up to public comment? Please.
I know this is the beginning of the conversation. I have a million thoughts going through my brain, but I really want to thank you for organizing this and keeping us on track here. So I think we're good to open up for public comments.
Excellent. And, just to say, a lot of the topics that we're discussing are not exhaustive, and we want to make sure that our stakeholders and partners in this work bring those topics to staff as well. So I just invite folks this is not an exclusive conversation, that we want ideas and priorities from the field to inform our work as well. So just wanting to put that on the record as well. All right. So again, opening it up for public comment. Each speaker will have up to 2 minutes to speak. Courtney, are there any public comments at this time?
Yes, if you would like to make a public comment and you're here in person, please line up at the microphone. If you're participating remotely, please raise your hand virtually. And I see we have someone here in person.
Good morning, Marina Espinoza with the California Housing Consortium. First, I would like to congratulate you for holding the very first HDFC meeting. It's very exciting to be here today. And we really appreciate the discussion today, especially around the policy issues that the committee is interested in prioritizing. We appreciate the committee's interest in focusing on construction lending, making improvements to the underwriting and loan closing process, and portfolio and asset management strategies. I'd like to offer our assistance as the committee tackles many of the critical issues it has identified. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to those participating remotely. I see we have David Harrington's hand raised. Please unmute your mic and go ahead with your comment, Mr. Harrington.
Yes, thank you. Am I coming through?
Yes, you are.
Very good. I want to, when we talk about producing more housing, do we see, I don't know if you can see my screen. I have this document here. Do I hit share screen, or is my document visible?
I'm sorry, sir, it's not.
Oh, it's not. Do I hit share screen?
Our tech team is telling me that's not possible at this time. Mr. Harrington, we did receive your written public comment, so if you're referring to anything within that, everyone here has been provided a copy of that.
Oh, good. Yes, that was from David Harrington, San Francisco. You see, yes, I did request it to be distributed, so you do have that?
Yes, we do.
Very good, thank you. Well, I just wanted to comment briefly that the streamlining permitting and allocating more funding is fine, but what is the thing that really holds it up? If you see, it is actually the way the houses are built. So, the lumber approach, you on site, you cut each stud or rafter to size and then nail each end in place. Instead, we need, as most all other industries, the construction industry is the sole holdout on mass production. So if we can't mass produce, we can't really expect affordability. And so we have to have more mass production in the form of prefabrication. In fact, so you mentioned incentivizing prefabrication. I propose in my document there that we actually I have a draft legislative proposal that we actually mandate, we legislate, make it law that we have to have, unless provided otherwise by the owner, all housing, at least housing, should be mass-produced, prefabricated. Otherwise, we can't expect affordability when everything is quote unquote handmade. We have to have mass produced like everything else you own, or most everything is mass produced. Why isn't construction mass produced? They're able to people, they find people will pay the price for handmade, and so they're charging it. But we should require that developers employ mass production, prefabrication for all housing, or you just cannot expect affordability.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. That concludes your 2 minutes. Thank you for your comment. If there are any other members of the public remote that would like to make a comment, please raise your hand at this time. And there's no more at this time.
Thank you so much. I do wonder if we want to consider having this as a standing agenda item, colleagues, on our agenda, where policy ideas can be offered.
I think that's a great idea, to have sort of an open
Yeah.
agenda policy discussion.
Yeah. Sir?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, moving to item 7. Public comment, the opportunity for members of the public to address the executive committee on matters within the executive committee's authority. We're going to open this up for public comment on matters within our authority. And each speaker will get 2 minutes to speak. Courtney, is there anyone who would like to make public comment at this time?
If any members of the public here in person would like to make a comment, please line up at the microphone. And if you are participating remotely, please raise your hand virtually and we'll call on you to speak. There's none at this time.
All right, seeing none. Last item, item 8, other committee matters. Colleagues, are there any other matters? Any members, if there are any other matters to discuss at a future meeting? We are now opening that up for public comment. Any other matters for this committee?
The only other matter I have, and this is probably not for a future meeting, is I just want to thank you, Secretary, for your leadership in bringing us here, and all of the teams within the state for actually, making this happen. It's been something that's a long time coming, as we've all said, so great, and thank you for making it through the first meeting.
Awesome, thank you so much. I couldn't do it without y'all. Thank you. Just to formally close us out on item 8, any members of the public, now is the time for public comment. Courtney, are there any public comments?
Is this to refute what I just said?
No.
Is that-
No, I'm just trying to follow the rules, sir.
If any members of the public would like to make a comment, if you're here in person, please line up at the mic. And if you're participating remotely, please raise your hand virtually. There's none at this time.
All right, thank you so much. This meeting's adjourned.